Thank you for joining. My name is Andre, and I will be your moderator today. This session is titled Regulatory Domain Session 2, What do regulations in the built environment cover? The speakers for the session are Nicholas Nisbet and Franco Cohen. This session is scheduled to last 90 minutes, including time for questions at the end. The session is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand over to the speakers, I would like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. For online attendees, your microphones will remain muted for the duration of the session. If you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please use the chat box in the control panel. For the attendees here in the room, please keep background noise to a minimum, and if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand and use a microphone. I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. And now I would like to hand over to the speakers.
Welcome everyone for coming to the second session. I'm just here to introduce Nick because he is the one who make all the presentation that are going to happen and everything that is going to happen in the next 90 minutes. I'm not responsible for that. No, I am, of course. Let's just a little introduction about a link between the previous presentation and the one about what is the future of regulatory domain, what we will do in the future, and something and what is going to happen in this session. Of course, as we said during the last session, our view is to increase and to make every day, every time, IFC and OpenBIM an institutional tool. So something that is going to be used and proposed and sometime, let's say, made mandatory from the governments, because we think that this is a process that is it comes from the nature of OpenBIM. It has been created by business, but actually nothing looks so institutional like an open, interoperable, and shareable standard for exchanging informations. Accordingly, one of the things that happens during our trip in this process, and everybody of you knows about, is we find some strong entanglements between what IFC does and what the laws are asking for, and what they should ask to IFC to do, to OpenBIM to do. And accordingly, Nick started to follow this river, yeah, and they started to study deeply what is going on in this area. And Nick, up to you. Tell us what can we do and what happened.
Well, first of all, we have that's code of conduct. But the question today, what is it that gets regulated in the built environment? And I suspect that every country has slightly different answers. And I think it's important that whereas last year, the regulatory domain did a project called the Regulatory Information Requirements Project. And in the end, we looked at fire, environmental, and accessibility as three things that get regulated in many countries around the world. But we didn't have time to step back and say, what else is there? And I raised this question, and I thought, actually, we will never get a good answer to that question until we ask as many people as possible. And Some of you may know that I'm also studying for a PhD at University College London. And I asked the same question of the research community, and they said, no one has answered this question ever. So I have to say that as well as helping the regulatory domain, I'm also asking these questions to help with a future research project. And that means I have to get your consent, okay? If you don't want to take part, you may go to the back. But I think it's really important that not only do we answer these questions for industry's sake, for government's sake, for the whole built environment process's sake, but yes, we must also make sure that academia can have use of this information to think about some of the bigger questions. And we will start with some big questions. But anyway, if anyone's not happy with being a guinea pig, not only for buildingSMART regulatory domain, but also for academic research, please feel free to say so now. That said, what we're trying to do is to make sure that we fill in the gaps in these diagrams to say, what is the conversation between applicants and the regulator, and sometimes the people who do the inspecting of the plans are different from the people who set the regulations. So there are probably three actors involved. So I think what we're trying to do today, with your help, in return for a free biro and post-it notes, is just to try and make a map of the world, including the unusual bits around the edge. I think, when we think of building regulation, we think of fire safety as one of the main things, but we need to explore other things. And the other question, before we can talk about detail, is I'd like to ask one really big question, whilst you're still awake and listening to me. What are the main reasons that governments make regulations and we try and follow them? And so the challenge is to get hold of a post-it note and a pen and try and write down, let's say, 4 reasons as to what governments are trying to do when they make the regulations. And I'm talking both about city planning, zoning, regulations, and building technical regulations. We can sort them out later, but I'm interested in both. So what do you think the 4 main reasons are? And it'd be really good if you write down what you think, because then we can compare.
May we read the notes from the people that is connected? Yeah. Okay. In case if you are just connected, you can write a note, and I will take this on the paper.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a role now.
Okay. There you are. You can have a big post-it note. Okay. So.
Just a technical question. You want 1 per piece of paper, or you want 4 on 1 piece of paper?
Let's have 4 pieces of paper. Okay, let's be extravagant with our paper. And sorry. And we have one wall on which we can stick things if we need to. So we'll get there. So it's a tough question. At least I think it's a tough question. Okay. Let's
AdWords not admitted.
Okay. How many people do we have online? Or do we know? Okay. Right. That's manageable. We have to ensure environment's best energy efficiency, carbon and climate. So I'm going to put that over here. And another one for public safety. So we're getting ones about public safety and also individual health. We have public health, which is a kind of social good. Area control. So there's a big dollar sign on this. So I think that's probably a financial concern, which is a third area. Protection of natural resources, we put that there. And gives another one is saying social purposes and environment purposes. And market balance and stability. That's very thoughtful. That's the answer that ChatGPT gave me when I asked it. So someone be talking to ChatGPT. So we have a safety, protect the public interest. Now that's an interesting one, isn't it? Any idea what you mean?
It's a legal definition in our legislation.
Okay.
So public interest is delimited by law, so they're now discussing that affordable housing should become public interest.
Okay.
And if they change the law, they would have a different way of building permits. Because if you permit something in public interest, you don't have to follow the other obstacles.
I can put that on economic. I'm not sure. It might be
But it's like overarching because public interest
Yes.
is also safety
Okay.
and security and
Yep.
environmental.
Yeah. Okay, and then we have.
I keep the microphone
Oh.
in another room. So,
Okay, sorry, two hands.
no, I will do.
Okay, you do this, right. There you are. Sustainable development goes here. And economic goes down here.
Safety and security.
I think that's in the middle.
Public safety and order.
I think that's still the middle, yeah. It's a kind of, there's social good and individual issues. Natural foundations of life, I think that's environmental. Protection of life and health in the middle, although it could be environmental as well.
Usage of land.
Sorry?
Usage of land.
I think that's economic, I think. It's very, some of these are hard and we might move them later. Okay.
Inclusivity.
Inclusivity, I think that's in the middle, that's a social good.
Health and safety.
Also in the middle.
Efficiency.
Efficiency.
Money. Economic.
Probably economic,
Yeah.
maybe.
Roadmap.
I'm not sure about that. Let's think. Is this a development plan? Roadmap?
Roadmap, yes.
It's a development plan, so it's a kind of economic strategy. So, good.
This is policy.
The last one is a tricky one. It's someone's written the boundary between the responsibility of the client and the government. In other words, what's being regulated is the relationship. And I'm going to start a new column here for that one because it's different. Okay. Now, any more do you want to put in? Oh, Tommy's done some. Thank you. Okay. Right. Okay.
This is my fiscal sustainability.
Okay. Oh, yes, definitely down the end there. Yep. That's big words. So, to keep the city view beautiful. Now, where do people think that should go? Is it a social benefit or an economic benefit? Any thoughts? You think it's environment? Okay, social. Okay. Yep.
At the same time,
Protecting human lives.
That's in the middle, I think, yes. And then we have one saying control of urban development. And so safety goes in the middle, that's for sure.
Control over urban development.
Perhaps that's economic. It's so we have environmental protection, living in green. That's it. Accessibility, that's a social benefit. Control the environmental effect of the build structure. So I think that's here with the environment.
Performance is just on the zone. Environmental or economic.
Economic, I think. It's
Control of the total view.
Yeah. Oh. There we go. Restrict the use of property. That's a very interesting one. You know, obviously, there's an idea of property rights in some countries stronger than in others, but any law restricts people's freedoms. Or most of them do. Urban landscape. So,
Environment.
yes. Urban acoustic environment. That's disaster prevention. I think that's a social good on a large scale. And safe indoor residential environment. Yeah. Right now, someone's been very thoughtful here. Safety in the built environment goes in the middle. And accessibility. Only two more to go. Sustainability of the built environment. And then the last one, integrated information flows between public registries. And I think that goes here about how we use the information. Now, you've, in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, have done something that took the academics 3 weeks. So, well done. And I think looking at the shape of our wall there, you can see that the main emphasis has been or is on individual safety and regulations that seem to be guiding the economic development or controlling it in different interests. And yes, there are regulations that affect the environment, both as we experience it and also the long-term preservation of nature and resources. So we've got some very good suggestions. Oh, yes? Are we mad?
No, actually, by following your classification of that, I would suggest to do a sub-classification of the middle part, which has safety, which is an overall propose. And there was another propose, this is more on daily life, like accessibility.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's just a suggestion.
Yes, it is. Yes, we could. I think that's the next stage. We've got to wait 2 slides until we get to that. Okay, so yes, the academics like a framework. They like to borrow stuff that had already been done, and so there are some well-known frameworks like triple bottom line, which says that anything should be evaluated in terms of its economic and financial benefit, social and individual benefit, and environmental benefit. And there's all sorts of expectations around that triple bottom line accounting. So that's one model that we could apply. But what it doesn't pick up is the strange ones on the end, particularly well. The other framework that's quite famous is called ESG. And ESG stands for environmental benefit, social benefit, and governance benefit. And yes, we've already talked about environmental and social benefit. But it introduces this fourth thing, governance benefit. And what I mean by governance, or what I think we mean, is how we govern the built environment. Who's responsible for things, and maybe what information is needed to do that. Of course, there are regulations about the permitting process itself, but that's the subject of another workshop, which we won't do today. Another framework is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These were the things that were developed in the year 2000, and it was the UN's suggestions of where we should focus our attention. I think 17 is too many things for a framework, but we could certainly pick them up and see if they fit on our map afterwards. Oh, good. The glue is short-lived. Okay, so we got some top-level purposes, and in fact, you've given some specifics within that. Yes, so we've probably got our topics within those groups. So I think you can relax. We have far more post-it notes than I thought we would get, so that's good. Did we get all the ones from online, by the way? Did we get all the suggestions from online?
No.
Okay.
No, not from online.
Okay. Well, so yeah. So the next step down is probably the things that you wrote on those post-it notes, the why. That there are things under those four headings that people are trying to achieve. And the examples that I came up with before today were under economic, orderly development. Many countries have unregulated development for a while, and then they realize that land use is being given to cities or housing which needs to be kept for agriculture, or that the buildings that are appearing are affecting each other, and then they start to think about a planning system and a building control system. I can look at the UK and say that goes back to 1666 when most of London burnt down, and people started to think maybe some regulation was needed. We've had sort of social and individual topics, and your suggestion to divide it down, I began to wonder what the divisions were. And I think the absolute requirement in many regulatory systems is safety. And then people add in health. We are starting to think about well-being. And I think when we think about pleasant cities or general environmental quality, in a way, what we're trying to do is to give people well-being. Now, of course, it gets difficult when an architect wants to build a white box in an old area of the town, and people say that that's distressing. So sometimes aesthetic controls come into arguments about people's well-being. And the other category that we picked up over there was inclusivity. Now, that's a word, not a very attractive word, but it includes accessibility, as many regulations start by trying to ensure accessibility for people in wheelchairs or people with reduced mobility. I think increasingly people are turning it around and saying, how do we make an environment that allows as many people in different categories or different kinds of categories to use the built environment? And that can include visually impaired people, it can include people who have hearing difficulties, which I include myself, and so on. I must admit that under environment, there are regulations to preserve nature as a good thing, biodiversity, access to green space, and then there's also environmental concerns to preserve finite resources, whether it's energy or fuel or other materials. And then there's this fourth one, governance. And the one that I wrote down first was the provision of information. 2 years ago, I helped publish ISO 19650 Part 4. And it's about the quality of information and how you accept it. But it argued that we needed sustainable information before we could have any other kind of sustainability. There are a few other things to appear under governance, and we've got some over there. So we're starting to make a framework, and that it seems to be complete. Now, I think there are two kinds of framework. A framework is a skeleton on which you hang other things. And you can have a skeleton like we have, and it's brilliant because we can eat and eat and get fatter and fatter, and the skeleton just carries on. If you're an insect, you have the skeleton on the outside, and it restricts you. So I think if this is our framework, it's important that we treat it as a human skeleton, and we can extend it if we need to. If we find it's not working, we'll add another category or move things around a bit. Yeah, okay. Now, so we're starting to make a kind of map of the regulations we find. At the center, I started with economic, environmental, and social and individual as issues. Late arrival, governance. I wasn't going to redraw this diagram, so it's there on the side. Around economic, we have this kind of tension between growth and stability. That if growth is too fast, people are, poor results arrive, and different uses in an area conflict with each other. So there's a pressure for stability and growth, or conflict perhaps. When it comes to environmental, we're in a world where, yes, we like the idea of preserving nature, but in terms of resources, we haven't actually decided if we're really concerned with the embedded carbon, the initial use of carbon, whether we're worrying about the ongoing use of carbon, or other resources like water, or whether we can actually think about the end of life and circularity. And I think different countries have got different priorities in those areas. We know that the EU is leading the way in some of these regulations. And being the EU, they're probably going to regulate all three of those things before long. When it comes to social and individual, as you said, I've sort of thought about well-being, health, and safety. And then around the outside, we're starting to plot how do we achieve those things. And this is where I want you to get your Post-it notes out again. Because when it comes to the how, there's a huge variety. If we just think about fire safety, we regulate compartment size in a building. And we regulate the materials that can be used on the boundaries of that compartment. We regulate the materials that can be used on the escape routes. We regulate escape distances. We regulate that there must be fire brigade access. And I've probably missed a few going through, but we use lots of individual how questions. How are we going to try and make sure that this building is protecting safety and health, and so on? And it's those how questions that I want to collect from you next, except you're not allowed to mention any of the ones that I've said. Yeah, so when we get out to the how, the reason these are important to the regulatory domain is because it's at the how that we start talking about what information should be in a BIM model for it to be regulated or assessed for regulatory compliance. And it's all these individual metrics, measures that really determine how regulation is actually made and put into action. This morning we saw the Czech project, one of the EU projects, and they focused on 17 how questions for 4 different municipalities. Setbacks was one of them. Setbacks is an interesting one. But anyway, the height of buildings, the distance of setbacks from the road, and I can't remember what the other 15 are, but yeah. So the how question, what I want you to do is to use your remaining Post-it notes to think of what are the things that are actually regulated, and stay away from fire safety because I've covered that already. Okay, so try and fill out some more with some how. What are the things that are measured to achieve all those wonderful goals?
You can start, so I wait for the one that asks for more time.
Okay. I'm going to have to ask some questions as I go through. The sky rate from the road, is that a planning constraint? Sky rate from the road? I think it might be a kind of density measure. If I'm wrong, we'll come back to it. Overshadowing regulations. Yes, so I mean, that's a kind of environmental restriction. I perhaps put them down there. Thank you.
Restriction of height and floor area.
Yes, I think it's a. I think some of these can probably appear under several headings, and that's one of the interesting things that you controls on height. It may be an economic thing, or it may be a social thing. Housing, threshold height of balcony doors. So that's safety. Oh, threshold heights. Sorry, yes, okay. Okay, yes, it's inclusivity. So yes, it still goes in the middle there. Yep. Yes. Okay.
Floor ratio.
Floor ratio. Site, yes, I think that's sort of a kind of economic restraint. Oh. Yeah. I know who said this one. Yeah. Academically, all of this is anonymous, but we know who this has told me. Network connections. Now, I didn't realize that it's an EU requirement, and I've puzzled over the UK regulation. There is a requirement that new housing should have high-speed fiber internet connections. Can anyone tell me why? Can anyone guess why? It's a social benefit? Yeah, okay.
Communication.
Well, it could come under communication, but I think it's a social benefit, yes. So it's an interesting one, that internet access has become a social good. Yes, good.
Actually, every building has to have road access in Germany. This is
Write it down.
yeah.
Who said the number of saunas?
That's the most important.
I know.
We have the minimum.
So, I imagine that's a social good, because if
Now it's so that you feel bad. Wellness is related to
yes, it's definitely, yeah, it's a wellness thing. There we go. Right. Yes. Quantity and performance-based incentive schemes, voluntary kickbacks. No, that's kickbacks is something else. Setbacks, perhaps. So I think this is probably part of the economic restraints on land.
like one setback from the road. Environment or
Let's say environment. I think, I'm not sure. It's, okay, part of the how is definitely the hierarchy of constitution, law, technical standards, and then local regulations. So, and another aspect of how urban planning, zoning, land use, health standards, transport and traffic regulation, mostly land use. So although there are health standards in there, I think it's mostly to do with land use.
scale, according to the surrounding buildings.
Environmental, I think.
Environmental.
So, oh, so,
No way.
okay, and we have part of the how is the hierarchy from EU, regional, national, something else. Sorry, EU, national, regional, municipal. So that's part of it. And
Structural strength is in
safety. So, big one. And yeah. Okay, I think someone's picked up on the metrics. Sometimes we have requirements, sometimes we have restrictions, and sometimes we have allowances. And I think that in another realm or another topic, it's quite interesting that different countries regulate differently. And sometimes they list the things you're allowed to do, and sometimes they list the things you're not allowed to do. And it's important to notice the difference. So, okay, go on.
It is very easy. You will put also the
Yes.
area, so safety,
Okay, yes,
accessibility.
thank you, thank you. Now, and then we have some thoughts about a bit more about how maybe carrots are better than sticks. So yes, I mean, in the regulatory room, we like to think about how all compliance can be automated, and that should be a carrot for parties to say that they want to use BIM because they get a quicker or better answer. Set up fairness for the use of natural materials. Yeah, that's environmental. And yes, part of the how, which I didn't mean to lead you on quite so much, was setting the limits. Usually they are minimums and maximums.
This is Windows areas, but it's both well-being and energy efficiency.
Yes, you can put it in the middle. I think that's all right. Yes. yeah, quality checks. I'll put in this governance and how. So I think,
How the responsibility is shared. This is here.
yeah, I think so.
Governance.
Yes, I mean, how is responsibility shared? I've been part of a study looking at 17 countries, 18, 19, 20 now. Anyway, looking at their different regulatory systems, and part of the administration of the regulations is whether the applicant has to prove they pass or whether they submit their design and the regulator decides if you've passed, whether you get a third party like a certified structural engineer to evaluate your design and so on. So, so we'll put certification there as one of the mechanisms. And we're coming to it, material usage ratios. Anyone explain that? Any thoughts? Any explanation?
The index of usage of, for instance, concrete ratio areas of construction.
Is that regulated?
My country it isn't, but I think it is in others.
Oh, right.
So it's kind of at least we have in Finland we have this new regulations coming from the materials and products, and I think it's kind of linked to that. It's not regulated the ratio, but it's regulated that you need to report, and then there is we have limit values. I think Sweden has also limit values for the carbon footprint per square meter.
Ah, okay. So sounds a bit environmental to me.
Yeah, that's
okay. That's yeah. I mean, I think the and then for safety we have structural minimums. Go there. Responsibility. I think that's a really important part of the governance, that increasingly the regulations are making the owner of a building responsible for all sorts of actions, not only maintaining the building, but looking after the people who live there and so on. Structural safety. More there. We have enforcement over here, which is good. And codes are over here as a mechanism.
We have what are the target indicators? It's here.
Well, it's environmental, I think, in this case.
Yeah. And also, what are the skills grade certification required for the design?
Yeah, I think, yeah. So, yes, some of these points sort of cross over into the administrative process. Only certain designers, structural engineers can do certain things. Colors.
Yes, some colors are forbidden, some are recommended. I was on like higher generic level.
Yeah, right.
But I didn't specify.
Actually, we have in the accessibility legislation.
Yes.
It has.
Yes.
It doesn't exclude or include specific colors, but there is that the colors should be kind of distinctive. That people with disability problems with sight can see, for example, the stairs.
Yeah. A lot of regulations, I mean, are looking for contrast.
Yeah.
And when we were looking at the UK regulations for the DCOM project, the computer scientists read the regulations and said, what is this word contrast? It's not defined anywhere. It's not how to measure it. As soon as we asked a building control officer to join the team, he said, oh, everyone knows that contrast is defined in BS 4279C 2007, and there's a calculation method at the back, and so on. And that was, I think that was a really interesting lesson that there are things that are in the regulations but aren't defined in the regulations. We'll put that under accessibility, but yeah, sometimes aesthetics, you end up with design codes. And then we've got three left: product passes, measures, and topology.
Yes.
You regulate it?
Oh, I mean, there should be a relation between the outer door and the walkway.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I'm not
right.
sure that's still on that list.
Okay. So it's probably on the functional configuration. Product passes and measures. Well, measures we'll put over here in the means. And product passes, product passports? Yeah, okay. Tends to be environmental at the moment, doesn't it? So, good.
I have two here, and I think they're missing from there. And I'm quite surprised that they're missing because these are
Well,
four.
well, this is not an official process, so you won't be penalised for late submission. Okay. So the two bombshells, late arrivals, area calculations, and deviations in the calculation of building areas. So I think the area calculation usually relates to the economic planning processes. You'll have to talk about the deviations, though.
Well, you could say that the area calculation is connected there, but it's not alone because it's also social. Because for example, you say that what is a room? How small can a room be?
Okay. Okay.
What is a apartment? What is the minimum size of something where you live in? And so there is, but it's of course it's in many silos. And then the deviations, surprise, it's actually connected to sustainability.
Three more.
Oh, right.
Road access
Okay.
is from distance between buildings. This is another
Yeah.
not so easy because you can manage different. It can belong to different areas.
That's typically requires.
Yeah. So I think we'll put it under safety.
And the other one is wastewater.
Wastewater treatment. Yep.
In Germany, there are two distances. One for fire safety, which I know very well, but there's another distance that you have to follow within the borders of your site. Yeah.
Is that kind of shading?
Yeah.
Is it privacy or is it urban planning?
A little bit for density of building sites.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also you cannot you rule that in some parts you can build out of suburbs. You will have houses standing alone. Yeah.
It's driven by the character of the area. Yeah. Sorry, driven by the character of the area. Yeah. So, I mean, the point of this is that there are lots of different mechanisms that are used to try and achieve these four main goals and the individual objectives within them. And it's by listing those that we'll be able to develop the buildingSMART regulatory information requirements by making sure that we don't focus only on the most obvious. So that's one part of it. And the other benefit of having a map is that we will be able to compare countries much more easily if we have a standard way of laying them out. So there's an aim there. Okay, so what did I write down? Yes, I mean, my thought about scale was that, yes, in many countries, the zoning and planning regulations are administered or thought of separately from the narrow technical building facility level questions. I can mention that in the UK, some of the fire regulations have been added into the planning process. much to the confusion of everyone. But so sometimes it's not hard and fast as to which of those two scales are being regulated. I mentioned that fire safety has got multiple ways of being controlled. Similarly, sanitary safety, we have regulations on sewer pipes, connections, ventilation, all of trying to achieve the same thing, which is to keep us away from the brown stuff. Yes, and then we find all sorts of metrics to try and use those for control, like area measurements or distance measurements, in order to preserve character or to preserve privacy or to preserve fire safety. We use distance as a metric, sometimes very closely related. Fire tends not to travel more than certain distances, and sometimes it gets quite remote. So we get maximums and minimums. Sometimes we have regulations that expect you to balance things, particularly in the planning area. Okay, now, I won't go through the UK example, but we have a legislative framework, just as someone mentioned, on the left here, starting with Acts of Parliament and ending up with ministerial statements, national development management policies, and previous decisions and outcomes. And this is the list that the UK government gives for what they're trying to do, starting with manage land use, shaping communities, protecting heritage and nature, and promoting sustainable development. And then you can go to the technical regulations, which start with the Building Act, and end up with things called approved documents, which are kind of strong guidance. And the way the regulations in the UK work is that in the building regulations, which is I think this morning I heard it called a decree, so it's not an act of parliament, it's issued by the government, called the building regulations. It explicitly lists 20-something topics, and lo and behold, the guidance follows the same structure. And the difference being that sometimes the list in the building regulations is much clearer. So it's a protection against intrusion for section Q, which I think is a lot more a lot clearer than part Q security, which could mean anything, well, lots of different things. Infrastructure for digital networks. These are the new ones that have come in the last few years. Security, infrastructure for electronic communications, electric vehicle. And then the last government decided to pass a new regulation about sanitary facilities and whether you could have mixed sex facilities or not in public buildings. And this is the oldest regulation of all, materials and workmanship. So sometimes you get lists which you can work with.
Are these all separate decrees?
The language is that the decree, well, the Act of Parliament is Building Act. The decree issued by the government department is the building regulations, and it has a list in Regulation 7 that these 20-something things are to be controlled, and it empowers the government department to issue approved documents. So there's very much the hierarchy. And you don't have to follow the approved documents if you don't want to. If you have some interesting way of meeting the regulations about structure that aren't covered by the approved document, you can try your luck.
Actually, my real question is that do we have some kind of a framework to compare different building acts, decrees, regulations, do we have kind of we could compare the regulations from country to country? So,
Yes, I mean, I think it's a common pattern to have and we heard about it from the Czech Republic this morning, was that you have an act of parliament. No, not the Czech project, the Czech country. And that has been passed, and it includes the power to make decrees about requiring BIM and submittals for regulatory approval. So that decree will go out, but almost inevitably there will then be supporting documents which are like the approved documents which say how you might achieve them. Now, I think that structure is fairly common, certainly across Western European countries. If anyone want to comment, I mean, Singapore is much the same pattern as the UK, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think over the years, they've also consulted, groups that have a certain, certain interest groups. Thank you. So what I can see is that our government also consults certain groups of people. So, for example, related to the accessibility code, they've consulted, the groups for people with special needs. And they have adapted, the policy and the accessibility code accordingly. So, for example, in the Singapore Code now, instead of handicap accessibility, like what is listed in the IFC schema, we don't call it that because many people would take offense. We've got to call it barrier-free accessibility. But the issue is that within the IFC schema, if you have to follow the IFC schema, we have to call it handicap accessible, which is not ideal. So we've got to find another way because otherwise, it's not entirely usable. So I think as the regulatory domain, I think it would be quite helpful to think about, you've listed so many examples there of the ways that, and I can see that across among us here in this room, regulations can differ so much from country to country, from state to state. We can't all just try to fit it all into the IFC schema. It's impossible. So then what is our framework for covering, information requirements that fall outside of the IFC schema? I'll give you another example. In Singapore, we also have these things called blast doors, and that's in every household in Singapore. So we have a bomb-proof door, right? Just in case something happens, we can escape into the bomb shelter. Not everybody would have a bomb shelter, but if you're a Singaporean, if you live in Singapore, you will have a bomb shelter. And it is a requirement by the Singapore Civil Defence Force that you must have a bomb shelter inside your house. So how do we, if the government were to, the government actually in Singapore, the Singapore government actually requires the household, the bomb shelter, and it must be made as an information submission to the government. So in that case, then how do we reflect that in the IFC schema so that we can all continue to be supported by open BIM standards?
If I may, we had this kind of, I've seen this kind of problem when I was working in different digitalization of different regulatories. And there is also many, for example, in a pharmaceutical, in a pharma regulatory, you have the problem that the doses of the pharmaceutical are different for a kid or for a woman or for a man. And so how we solved that was in including in the notation of the value some, let's say, neutral parameters that were saying in this case means man, woman, or kid, or in other cases this can be for diabetic or not a diabetic person. So this has been very, very sophisticated to be accepted for lawyers because they say, oh, how can I understand? You have to do a step more, but because the lawyers want on the paper everything, while in this case you have to have an extra step to understand what's the value, what's the meaning of the value. But at the end, that's been accepted. But in that case, it's easier because you have that pharmaceuticals are traveling around the world, and so you need a common approach. The same is for spare parts for aerospace and so on. But I think that at the end, we will arrive to this kind of, let's say, because it's a way of extract from the information, from the simple value, some information that you have to do something to know, but could be the way to, in my opinion, to add this or include this into the standard.
First of all, I want to say I fully accept the complaint about the handicapped accessible. And I think it would be an interesting challenge to see how quickly we could get that corrected.
I found it on GitHub.
Oh, well done. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, there were lots of those issues that we covered in the regulatory information requirements project. The bomb shelters are there, so because that's also in Finland. It's in every building, or in housing. You need to have that you have to have that in every building, and then you need to, if it's a public building, then you need to show that where people could go. It doesn't have to be in the same building, but you have to show that where is that shelter. My a little bit disagree on that standard part, and the reason is why. Why I disagree on that is that because we need these, like the shelter door, the blast door, or we need the accessibility properties and so on. And if we don't have those in the standard, then people start, or jurisdictions or authorities start to invent them by themselves, which is, you could say that that's okay. It's a free world, but then it makes the checking of these properties quite difficult, because you can't generate tools that can check these things. When it's a strict property, it's maybe easy. You can modify, you can create an ideas, and it's flexible. But when it comes to a bit more complex, for example, like escape routes, or similar, which are combination of information and geometry, then it really comes, it's a nightmare, and it's really difficult to create such a tool. So I think that we need, probably we won't cover all, and Nick will never ever accept the number of saunas into the standard. but my point is that we will always have those local ones, which are kind of country specific things, but we should find kind of the common ground. And there are actually a lot of properties, property sets and properties which are common to globally, and they should be in the standard. And then we should, as a regulatory domain, I think that we need to find the use cases such as fire safety, which is complex to analyze that or accessibility. How can you access a space in a building? It's a complicated route probably, and so how can we do that? And I think that those kind of things we should analyze and then develop the standard and implement the things that we need into the standard, I think. Because otherwise, if yeah, like I said, it will be really tricky that if all countries develop by themselves solutions which are not kind of comparable.
Yes, I think we've discovered that Singapore has something in common with Finland, and I know that in Israel they have the same. Well, they have a more extreme version where the central core of tower blocks has to be bomb-proof. And it was explained to me as the proof that you could never automate regulations because the structural engineering of these towers is complex. I did automate it, so just to show that we could. Yes, so there will be local things. I think, as with the buildingSMART IFC standard as a whole, it's trying to cover the majority of things in most situations. There are, I'm afraid, some cultural biases in IFC, and should be avoided. But the one you raised, I agree, and I think I might use my position on the ISO committee to block the next version of IFC until it's corrected. There's a way to do it. Okay, so yeah, I think, obviously these are just an example, but we're trying to present, to gather a framework so that we can, as I say, compare countries. And the hierarchy of regulations seems to be fairly consistent around the world. You have legislation, you have, I only learned this word this morning, but decree, and then you have guidance. This kind of conversation and the ones that obviously I've been having have led to us developing quite a large table, which is not finished. But under economic benefit, we sort of identified orderly development, stability, and strategic aims. And then we started to list the how in this column and so on. The words highlighted in yellow are the words which I think are controversial. What is acceptable or orderly? What is the character of an area? But anyway, and then social and individual benefit, starting with safety, starting to develop the list of the kinds of things that are regulated. So under, to ensure developments protect safety around fire. At the larger scale, we have access for responders. At the smallest, at the building scale, fire resistance, fire detection systems, escape routes, firefighting equipment, fire loads, and compartmentation. And that list is growing, of course. Then we looked at health, sanitary conditions, use of safe materials, proper handling of waste, and under that, including the banning of materials such as asbestos. I'm sure that's not the only material that's banned, but that's an example. And then we get to well-being, and this is where the arguments really start, because to create a pleasant living environment, what are the controls that we use? To create a balanced and well-functioning community that meets the needs of its residents. Again, I can be picky, and I said, what do you mean by balanced? And I think the answer is equitable, that everyone gets the benefit of the way the built environment is developed. So we get playgrounds and things. To maintain the area's character and significance. So that gets you into historic buildings. I put that under well-being. rather than environment. Just environment, I don't know, it has many meanings. I think that's part of the problem. And then the last one, inclusivity, trying to make sure that we wrote this up without, in as inclusive way as possible, rather than discussing only accessibility. So yes, we get the things about visual clues and so on, but hopefully starting to think about whether the environment serves people with different ethnic needs or limited income. So all the things you've said will end up in this chart in one form or another. Under environmental benefit, environmental protection, natural resources, and degradation. And you can see there's land use on the larger scale and building performance on the smaller scale. And then under governance, and I think that's the one which has probably is growing because it came late into our thinking. The two main areas that we've thought about so far is to support responsibility. There's a lot of regulations make the builder or the owner responsible for certain things, like who holds the key in case the fire brigade need access, who's looking after the tenants, and then we have in the UK formal roles like lead designer and lead contractor. And then under the what, to support continuity, requiring information. And I think this is the thing that is coming into a lot of regulations, usually for specific purposes like fire prevention. You know, we now have regulations that say there must be a map of the building in a box near the front door for for high-rise housing. But there are other things coming in like health and safety risk, presence of chemicals and so on, which is probably the information has had to be there for a few years now. So your inputs will end up in this table in some form or other. I think we've done quite well. We haven't found too many questions that really challenge us. We've discussed broadband internet provision. I've mentioned this single-sex toilet provision, which the UK government put in, as much for political reasons as, I don't know. Anyway, the two that I thought I'd finish with, unless you've got questions, is maximum density and minimum density. The regulations are starting to deploy both of those. Density in terms of square meters of building on a site or number of people per square meter. But people are specifying both the maximum density and the minimum density. And I thought I just wanted to ask what you think the point of those two are. What is the value of specifying maximum density and minimum density? So anyone want to call out?
I mean, in Sweden, it's not allowed to have too many persons per apartment and so on. Because people try to earn money in renting small rooms for many persons. Yeah.
Any country's got minimum density regulations? It's being talked about, but anyway, perhaps it doesn't exist. I think the interesting thing about the minimum density is that it's being proposed to try and intensify cities so that sorry?
Some districts in London.
Yes, some districts. In order to intensify the use, because the thing that struck me driving through Berlin was that all the residential blocks were 6 or 8 stories high, which is enough that all the shops on the ground floor were busy. When we went through a district where they're all a bit lower, all the shops were empty because there weren't enough people. and so on. So I think there's, anyway, sorry. Tell me more.
Actually, there had been attempts in cities to build houses on sites that had been built yet. So to make owners to build buildings, because we have a lack of flats in Germany, yeah? And we don't want to cover more land usage outside cities. So this is perhaps an attempt for minimum density, but it's not a regulation on density, yeah? But it's a regulation on land usage as it is given from planning, yeah? Because it's a value that is given to the owner of the land, and this has to be done for public health or public social things. So you have to build a flat because the land is valuable, yeah?
Okay, so yes, so effectively the planners have done the sum of what the site area is and said you need at least 6 stories or whatever. Yeah.
Maybe for you who have been in Finland, who visited Finland, it might become a surprise that we are running out of land. But it's kind of it's a political. I think that the density is kind of the political thing that, well, city of Helsinki, obviously, they are running out of land where you can build, and so they need to find they need to densify. But at the same time, I guess that then there could be cities who want to minimum. They or maximize that. So that's a minimum density, and then on the other way around. But I think it's a political thing more to me than anything else. It's how to control the growth of the city, basically, or a certain area of the city.
Anyway, that was the last challenge question.
And of course, it's not regulated. It's it's a city level political decision. Yeah.
Okay. So, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining in with this game, this activity. I think there's a lot of material there. I will be collecting it afterwards. I think you should all give yourselves a round of applause for joining in. So thank you. And see you all in Porto.